It is an honor to be here, and I am Dave Bullock, the 21st State Auditor of North Carolina, and I never in a million years would have believed I'd be excited about being the State Auditor of all things. I did go to Carolina, and Mr. Barker, as you know, I went to Campbell, got my law degree and MBA degree, and sort of inside between us, Oscar Harris, the late Oscar Harris, was one of my business mentors. So that should give you some extra confidence in my ability to do the job. State auditor, right? So nobody, let's just face it, nobody really knows what the state auditor does or who in the heck the state auditor is. And I've got proof. So I got invited to speak to the County Commissioners Association. So county commissioners, like most organizations, they get together every year. They were in Greenville this year. They all got together and they invited me to come speak. And so I gave my speech and it was fine. And I told them kind of what we're doing in the office. And they said, would you like to stay for dinner? And I said, sure, be glad to. So it was at East Carolina. It was up in the Town Bank Tower, and they had a banquet set up, round banquet table, and they sat me at a round table, and I had two young staff guys with me, and a nice young lady was sitting to my right. And she had on her name tag, and it said that she was the clerk to the county commissioners. And I said, well, this is going to be interesting. So I asked her about her job. She said, yeah, I work with the elected county commissioners. I take care of their, paperwork, make sure they're up to date. I keep them informed with what's going on. It works really good. I said, well, how long have you been doing it? She said, 25 years I've been doing this job. I was like, wow, that's impressive. And we talked for a little while. And I'm sitting there thinking in the back of my mind, well, she's worked with elected officials for 25 years. To be sure, she knows exactly who I am and who the state auditor is. But we ended the conversation. She looked over at me. She says, I think you said you worked for the state auditor's office? I said, yeah, I am the state auditor. She said, is that a family business? She said, I asked you that because I was wondering if these two guys were your sons and you're training them to take over. And I tell you that for a couple reasons. One is, be real careful when you start thinking you're a big something, because people in North Carolina will quickly put you in your place. Mm-hmm. And number two, it is true. Not a lot of people really know what in the world the state auditor does or why we even have it. So the state auditor is elected. There's 10 statewide elected executives in the state of North Carolina. So our executive branch is actually broken up into 10 different parts. So we have governor, lieutenant governor. Everybody knows the governor and has a good idea of what the governor does. Lieutenant governor replaces the governor and does some stuff over at the Senate. We have an attorney general. We have a secretary of state. We have a treasurer. We have a labor commissioner. We have an insurance commissioner. We have an agriculture commissioner. And there's one more. We have I think that's it. I've got all 10. Those are all 10. And it's interesting, my wife, she gets all the political jokes and stuff, and she heard a lot of sort of political type jokes on the campaign trail. And when election night came around in November, I went to bed like at 3:30 in the morning the day after, and I felt pretty good about the fact that I had been lucky and blessed to win, and didn't really get a lot of sleep. I was full of adrenaline, and I got up pretty early the next morning, and it was really, for all intents and purposes, a normal day around the house. And I'm sort of sitting there, and my phone rings, and it was Senator Budd, and I took the call, and he said, congratulations, Mr. Auditor. And I said, well, thank you, that's very good, blah, blah, blah. And I appreciate it, and hung up. And so I started, again, really feeling good about myself, right? And I looked over at my wife and I said, I looked this up. I said, I'm sixth in line to be governor. And she said, well, that's fascinating. Number 6, take your son to carpool. So she'd heard those jokes before, so she knew. She was ready for that kind of attitude. Look, what does the state auditor do? Our general job is to hold government accountable at all levels. We have bread and butter work. And John, you understand this as much as anybody in the room. The bread and butter work of the state auditor's office are financial statement audits across state government. And those are your agencies, your universities, and community colleges. And what we do is we assure rating agencies and folks that do business with the state of North Carolina and these institutions that the financial statements of those institutions and entities can be relied upon. And that sounds really boring, and it can be to some extent, but it's really important. And why is it important in North Carolina? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. One is it contributes and basically bolsters the AAA credit rating of the state of North Carolina. Without those audits of the financial statements, we don't have a AAA credit rating. That allows us as a state and each individual university and our entities to borrow money when we need to at favorable rates. It also acts as a catalyst to really recruit and encourage businesses and industries to locate here. It's part of the economic development equation because no company wants to put their headquarters or a facility in a state that can't keep their books straight. So, you know, that stuff is really important. We don't really usually hear a lot about that stuff. I will digress a little bit and tell you though, except when it comes to the North Carolina Education Lottery. And so many of you may have read news reports the last week of the year. Every year, the state auditor audits the North Carolina Education Lottery, and it's right there in statute. And there are a couple of reasons why. One of which is probably, 20 plus years ago when the legislature passed the lottery, they said, well, let's make sure the auditor audits the lottery, right? Put that in there. But the numbers, the bottom line numbers for the education lottery also flow into what's called the annual comprehensive financial report, which is basically the financial statement of the state of North Carolina. Those numbers are required to be in that financial statement. So every year we get this audit. So last year, I wasn't the state auditor. That audit gets completed mid-October, 1st of November. When I got sworn in, one of the first things I asked for was a copy of the education lottery audit. I had a lot of questions on the campaign trail about what exactly the lottery does. And the results I thought were interesting because between, and I'm using fiscal years, and I know this is boring, but I think it's important to let you know, to show you where these financial statement audits can really make a difference, because they really can, and they can really inform you. From 23 to 24, the state lottery increased its revenue by $1 billion. So they went from 4.3 billion to about 5.5 billion or so dollars. They did contribute additional money to the public schools in an amount somewhere around $45 million. I thought that looked a little low on an extra $1 billion in revenue. So I met with our performance audit team, and at the next meeting, John can explain to you the difference between performance audits and financial audits, but you'll understand, John, what I'm talking about.
Sounds like a wonderful program.
The performance audits get into the weeds. That's where you get into where we're doing a performance audit right now down the road in Cary to find out how the city manager used his pay card, his credit card, right? That's where you get into the details. So I told the performance team, I said, when we finish with a couple of these projects, we did DMV audit, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We did audit of INCOR, which is the response to Eastern North Carolina Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. So when we finished those performance audits, I said, I think people of North Carolina deserve a performance audit of the state lottery. So I'm sitting around, of course, and sometime in end of October, 1st of November, the financial statement audit is wrapped up of the state lottery, and lo and behold, guess what? State lottery last year did an additional $1 billion.
Yeah.
So they did $6.6 billion in revenue. So I am a lawyer, but I got an MBA too, so I can do that math. That's $3 billion in excess from 2023, right? Except last year they contributed $20 million less to public schools than they did in 2024. So that is where a financial statement audit can really be instructive. and can lead to a full probe performance audit, which we are involved in. We thankfully had already started that because of the previous year's audit, so we started it in October. It raises some serious questions, and I'm certain, and I've talked to them, they've been in my office and I've been in their office, there'll be a lot of detail that comes out, and there's a lot of explanations for business models and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, if you're doing that kind of business, right, and you're contributing less to the public schools, and I was riding to work today and listening to a school teacher who was talking about buying supplies for her own classroom. You know, I think it's incumbent upon the state auditor, that's why we have one, to ask these tough questions, right? What are we doing? What's the return on investment? What's the bottom line? Why is the revenue up by $3 billion and yet you're contributing $20 million less this fiscal year than you did last year?
Are they opening daycares or?
Well, it would be a long story, Rob, but we're in the middle of that performance audit. But I tell you that story just to tell you that while these financial statement audits, a lot of times, they are designed to give reliability. And the fact of the matter is, the financial statement audit that we completed is accurate. The numbers are right. But read it, right? You know, I think it's important for the guy who gets selected to actually pick up the document and sit down, even though it's not much of a page turner, to actually read it and see what the numbers say. Okay? Because it's been, and this is no reflection one way or the other on previous office holders. You can run the office however you want if you get elected. But there's not been a performance audit completed of the North Carolina Education Lottery in nearly 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
So now's the time. So that's why I get jazzed about this office, is because if this office is targeted in the right direction, we can actually make impact. And I'll talk now about D&V. There's an example where I think we can make and have made a positive impact through cooperative government. You know, I ran, it's not a secret, if you ever heard me on the campaign trail, and not a lot of people did, because again, it's the state auditor, but one of the things I talked about was auditing the D&V and utilizing the power of audit to bring to the forefront and put on the front burner a real sore spot for the people of North Carolina. And the DMV is and was and is, continues to be a bit of a sore spot. And so I pledged to the people that I would audit the DMV, so we did. And when we finished that audit, and we finished it in the spring and we released it, it's almost 700 pages.
Wow.
And it's full of data. We sent that team out and we crawled the walls of the DMV in Rocky Mount and went out into the DMV offices across the state of North Carolina. And one of the cool things that I found when the team came back from actually visiting license examiners and people that work in these individual DMV offices is that consistently in the response was, nobody's ever asked us. Nobody's ever asked us how to do this better, right? And so we were able to take that information. We brought in experts. We really leveraged our public university system. We brought in experts from UNC Greensboro, NC State, and UNC School of Government to help us. We brought in some outside experts, and we came up with a real laundry list of recommendations on how to make the DMV better. And a lot of people thought, because I'm conservative, that I would never recommend that more people need to be hired. But that's not really necessarily the test of business acumen. The test and the question that we asked on the DMV was, what is the return on investment? What's the job of the DMV? And when you've got 350 people moving into the state of North Carolina every single day, and they all need a driver's license to drive and get to work, they need an ID to vote, okay? We've got to provide that level of customer service. So adding license examiners in that instance is actually a return on customer service to the people of North Carolina. And I'll point this out. Oscar would be proud of me, Mr. Barker. DMV is fully receipt driven. So when you add additional license examiners, you add capacity and you actually increase revenue. Right? And so that has worked. We've added 45 new license examiners over the last 3 or 4 months. We've moved some additional things. I say we, the state has moved services online, which was one of our recommendations, added the additional employees. We ended, one interesting thing that my son's taken advantage of, you know, when you take your 16-year-old, and I've taken 2 16-year-olds, I got one 15-year-old now, but I've taken 2 16-year-olds for the driving test. You know, what is the real payoff for 15 minutes with a license examiner in the car when you've already been to driver's ed with your driver's ed teacher? So what we now have is the ability, instead of them having to go through the 15-minute drive test, which takes an average of 45 minutes, their driver's ed instructor can do the driver's test and certify that they're done. They do it in about 30 other states. The real safety benefit on the of what our report shows and what our experts show is the log, which is the driving with the parent. It's that 60 hours of driving that really is the better payoff on safety. So you say 45 minutes when you're with a license examiner, that allows 5 other people to be able to get a real ID in that time frame. Okay, that's one of the ways we can. And you can still go and get the license examiner to do the drive test if you want. But every little inch that we can save in terms of time and not give away safety benefit, I think is a good thing. And the reason I tell you all this stuff is that, you know, I met with the commissioner, the new commissioner of the DMV. He actually came to my office and met with me 2 days before he got sworn in. I've met with the governor at the governor's mansion and in my office about this. And I've met with legislators who passed some legislation and gave some additional appropriations on this. So all of those groups got together and are working together in a cooperative way. It became a shared governmental value at the tipping point of our audit. So I'm really proud of that, and I think that shows that if you get in there and actually try to be creative with using an office like the state auditor's office, you can have impact for everyday North Carolinians.
I moved here a year and a half ago from Pennsylvania, where when you go to DMV, you just show up. You don't need an appointment. Everybody gets served, and there's usually a minimum of 10 people in there that are working. And I tried for, I think, almost a month to get an appointment at Fuquay. I finally gave up. I showed up one day, there was a line of 100 people outside that office in August.
I understand.
And
it's getting better. We're working on it, and I told the people of North Carolina when we released it that I'm a dog with a bone on this. And so, but I also pledged to the governor and the commissioner of the DMV that I would not send my team back in to follow up on the recommendations for a reasonable period of time, because I don't want to get in their way. They need to have an opportunity to take the recommendations, and they're taking our recommendation. In fact, our team testified in front of a legislative committee, and right after us was the commissioner of DMV. And in his slideshow, he listed the things they're working on, and it mirrored our recommendations. So they're taking our recommendations and putting them into work. So I've got a lot on the line to fix the DMV as well. I'm confident we're going to be able to do it. Look, I've been there. I used to be able to, with my other two kids, and I've got a 27-year-old and a 25-year-old. We were able to walk right in and get a license. So that wasn't that long ago.
You can't even get an appointment with Fuquay Varina. They're like 8 months out on Fuquay Varina.
Yeah.
So we went to Lillington, but when we go to Lillington, we have to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's already there with their chairs. From 6 o'clock in the morning, we didn't get to see anybody till 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I'm aware. Again, it's not a fix at the snap of a finger, but I do think it's getting better, and it's going to get better because, as I said, I'll repeat it. Second time I've said it, and I'll say it 3 times if you want. I'm a dog with a bone on this. We're going to make sure it gets right.
You hired 45 more people. You actually need another 45.
Well, we may, and that's going to be part of our review to make sure that we get it.
I'm an insurance agent. I didn't know you were going to talk about the DMV. So I know that my customers can't get in, they've moved here. If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you can't wait 6 hours like I waited to renew my license. But I'm seeing a trend I've never seen before. 20 plus years in insurance, I now have a whiteboard trying to keep track of who got their North Carolina license because the insurance companies are not pushing the 60 days. But I have people now who lived here 18 months or longer. Is there any way of figuring out how much revenue you're losing? These people aren't registering their cars here, they're not paying taxes here.
Bingo, you got it. That's my follow-up to the DMV. But I don't want anybody to think, and I don't want the DMV or legislature or whatever to think that I am, in the way. I've got that. We gave a very comprehensive audit, and I would recommend you read it too. It's great. It's on our website.
They're still full. I was in there this
I know it's got good recommendations, but I told them I'd give them a reasonable time to implement them, and so we'll see where they are. Okay, because the second part that they have not there are two things they have not implemented. Okay, that I know they haven't implemented because they told me they weren't going to. One is to move the DMV out of the Department of Transportation. Now, may not have a choice on that. Legislature may very well do that. One of the reasons that we recommended that was because the DMV creates, through fees, $2.2 billion a year in revenue. Okay, but it costs about $240 million to run that agency. So that's a pretty good ROI in terms of government, right? But in order for them to make any decision at the Division of Motor Vehicles, they got to run it up 3 or 4 flagpoles at the DOT. They need to be more nimble, and they need to be able to move that. And they also need a commissioner that answers directly to the governor instead of to the Secretary of DOT. And the reason I say that, and the reason our team felt really strongly about this, and this wasn't me saying this is the way it needs to be. This is what I got from the professional team, right? I feel this way too, but they sold me on this, is because you've got to be able to make quicker decisions, because this DMV, when we did a survey, it is the most public-facing part of state government. Everybody has to go to DMV once you're 16, and really when you're 15, you got to go to DMV. All right. So, and I took my 15-year-old. I had to drive to Winston-Salem. They didn't give me any special favors, but although the lady did recognize me.
What was the second recommendation?
Second recommendation is that we leverage the license plate agencies, which are already connected to the computers, and we give people a Disney-esque fast pass where you go ahead and pay your 50, 60, whatever the right number is, pay an extra fee to go to a license plate agency and have the license plate agency issue you a real ID.
I'll sign up for that.
Super.
Now, when you
It's
talk about
a
license-
fast pass lane. They're already hooked up to the computer. The LPAs are. Now, some LPAs are also stacked and racked, right? But there are many LPAs that aren't, and that have retail capacity to add a terminal, a couple of terminals, and then I come out of the private sector. If you can charge 50, 60, whatever the right number is, as an extra fee to come in and get a license quicker, those numbers add up pretty quick to make it worthwhile for the license plate agency to be able to actually issue that. Now, a lot of opposition from the State Employees Association on that, and I understand that, but the fact of the matter is we've got to get people their driver's licenses, and any creative way we can do that, we need to at least look at it and leverage it.
And when you speak of the license plate agencies, you're speaking of these privately owned and operated.
That's correct. There are only
agencies
2
that are
government-owned license plate agencies. They're both in Raleigh. Everything else is a private. So this would be a private contract. But look, these folks are already certified to give you your car registration, right? So there's already plenty of government regulation there.
We got one right across the street, by the
Yeah.
way.
Being the conservative I am, you just said that we would have to pay extra if we went to the office to get our license.
Yep.
Why not give them a discount to those that get it online?
Well, That is another
You stand on
recommendation that we
charge more
made.
to go to the office.
So if you look at that, I will give you, that is one they are considering. They actually charge you more to go online than if you go in person.
You charge less.
And we recommended, you can read this in our audit, we recommended a discount for doing things online.
Yeah.
So that's consistent with my values. But I will say this, I do think it is consistent to say that if you are, and this is, you get the added, if you are not, and you use the example, doctor, lawyer, whatever, right? If you're not in that income level, right? You're not in that kind of echelon or whatever, but the doctor, lawyer, nurse practitioner, PA, people that have to work all the time, or if they can go in and pay the extra money to get their driver's license quicker, that has the added bonus of making the line at the regular DMV short, because you're taking that inventory away, right?
The carpenter don't need to have to sit either.
No, they don't, but there's a lot of carpenters make a lot more money than lawyers.
It shouldn't be gauged on how much money you make.
Well, but it should be gauged on convenience. If you're willing to pay for the convenience, you should have the opportunity to pay.
Right, and it's optional.
Yeah, you
Not
can go to
making anyone do
regular
it.
DMV.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to move it quicker. These are recommendations I feel really good about in terms of, you know, if you're willing to pay the extra fee to be able to get your driver's license quicker, you should have that opportunity to do it.
I'm a time person. We got 5 minutes, y'all. We can, will you come back again, maybe?
This DMV
Finish
stuff,
what
I
you
talk
can.
about this all day.
I was just ready to.
Yep, we
Yeah.
got like 5
Well,
minutes.
I do want,
before
let
we
me tell you a
adjourn.
couple other things about what we do. Look, we do the performance audits, and I talk about that. That's our DMV. We did Encore. We're working on the state lottery. We've done a lot of other audits as well. I do want to talk about investigations. That is something, I came into office and there were 2 people in the investigation division. Our statute allows for the auditor to do audits and investigations. There were only 2 people. I've got 14 people in our investigation unit right now. We're involved in municipalities and counties all across the state. Right here in Wake County, we're right in the middle of the situation in the town of Cary. I've got an investigative team that is there, and I'm not telling you anything that hadn't already been reported. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be releasing a comprehensive investigative report on the city of Rocky Mount. We've been involved in that. We also created something called a rapid response team, which allows us to go in and take care of timely matters. And the best example I can give you of that, of what we've already done to give real impact, is not in this area, but it's in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, which was $46 million over budget. They were in the hole $46 million. So why should the state auditor care about that, and what can the state auditor do about that? Well, here's what happens. This is how it works. Most everybody in here kind of probably understands that. School system runs out of money, what do? First thing they do is run the county commission and tell them we gotta have more money for the school kids. Okay? They don't really tell them why, they just say we're out of money. Next thing they do is to go to their legislative delegation and say we need some more state appropriations, you gotta give us money. They don't necessarily tell them why. They put additional political sort of areas of influence on kind of on the spot is the best way to say it. So we went in and did a quick audit, and we do it a lot quicker. We had to develop an additional, John, you'll appreciate this, an additional quality measure. So it's not an audit, it's a report, but we do have quality assurances there. And what we found was this, and see, if you put yourself in the shoes of a county commissioner and now you know this, and you find out that why are they $46 million over budget? Well, they hired 100 employees with one-time COVID funds. So you get a one-time revenue source, and you don't have those recurring dollars to keep those people employed, but you've got them on the payroll. You pay $75 million in bonuses to teachers and staff, which we'd love to be able to do, but you don't have money to do it. You borrow money from your reserves, and you run your line of credit with the Department of Public Instruction to be able to make those payments. You have a $332 million suspense account that you show as equity, but in fact it's uncategorized dollars. That is a management problem because the superintendent has no idea where that money went. It's also a transparency problem because it's not their money, it's taxpayer money, right? And so, pièce de resistance, you got a budget, right? Got a budget line item. Every time you hit the ceiling of that budget, I'll just use hypothetically, say number 2 pencils. Every time you hit that line item of the budget, you move the goalpost, right? But you don't do it a dozen times, you don't do it 2 dozen times. You do it 311 times in one fiscal year. That's more than once a business day. They're moving their budget. Right? You also run, which we'll have a supplemental report that details some other things about how they ran the cash flow. That detail, though, now informs a county commission and it informs a legislative delegation that they can't just write a check. They've got management problems that need to be addressed with the school system because school kids, the teachers, and the parents and the community deserve better management. Right, so that is the true worth of like a rapid response team because we were able to do that in less than 2 months. Okay, and usually a full audit would take 6-7 months, and then maybe it's. I will say one other thing: we got the DAVE Act, which many people may have seen this week. The North Carolina legislature passed something called the DAVE Act, which is the Division of Accountability, Value, and Efficiency in our office. Some people say it was named after me, I don't know. but we are releasing our first report. We've got our first sort of foray into that. We put on our dashboard. The legislature asked us to specifically take a look at full-time employees across state government and the positions that were unfilled and how many unfilled positions we had. Snapshot of that, I'll give you the cliff notes on this. When we did our report, it's a snapshot in time from this fall. There were 8,800 unfilled positions across the state of North Carolina. Now that's a mixed bag of positions that run anywhere from placeholder positions like in commerce for Employment Security Commission workers. So when unemployment goes up, you have to hire additional employees. Now I don't know how they ever fill those positions, but that's what they say anyway. There are also some federally funded positions, there were receipt funded positions, but there are state appropriated positions as well. Total budgeted number on those unfilled positions, $1.04 billion. And what does that mean? Why is that relevant? One, got to ask the question, are we delivering services to the people of North Carolina like we should? Should we get on the hiring boat quicker and get people hired? Should we change our salary structure? What types of things do we need to do? Or number 2, are we creating these positions and agencies being forced or choosing to use the budgetary dollars for these positions and then shifting that money to other operational needs of the agency or entity? Why is that important? It's important because that creates a lack of transparency because it's your money. It's not their money, it's every person in this room's money, and you deserve to know exactly how that money is being used. So when I talk to the Colonel of the Highway Patrol, he tells me in all earnestness, look, I need 100 of these FTEs to be able to buy gas. That's unfair to the Colonel of the Highway Patrol, right? He needs to be able to say, look, I need this millions of dollars for gas. So what that's going to lead to, we hope, is a truing up of our state budget. I think it's a really good use of the state auditor's office. Again, I'm glad to come back. I'm going.
Thank you very much. What do you think? What do you think, Rob? You got something to say about this? It's unbelievable, isn't it? Well, we have faith.
Contact information.
We have faith in you. We have faith.